There are photographs where a tank turret sits 50 meters away from the hull, upside down as if placed there deliberately. The steel is not torn apart. It is lifted cleanly, violently, and set down by physics that do not care about armor thickness or crew rank. In many of those photographs, there are no visible remains, not because nothing happened inside, but because what happened left nothing recognizable to photograph. Tank crews are trained to fear penetration, fire, smoke, spall. They are not trained to imagine the vehicle disassembling itself beneath them in less than a second. And for decades, many crews inside one particular tank never fully understood that this was possible until it happened. The T-72 was never meant to explode like that. On paper, it is a triumph of efficiency. Low silhouette, thick frontal armor, a powerful gun, a crew reduced to 3 men instead of 4. It looks modern, rational, even elegant. And for a long time, it worked exactly as intended. The logic behind the T-72 begins far from any battlefield. It begins with geography. The Soviet Union expected war across vast, flat terrain. Eastern Europe, where distance mattered more than finesse. Battles would be fast, violent, and decisive. Tanks would surge forward in enormous numbers, trading losses for momentum. Individual survivability mattered less than operational continuity. A tank was a component, not a sanctuary. To support this doctrine, the tank had to be small. Smaller tanks are harder to hit, smaller tanks are lighter, smaller tanks cross bridges and mud more easily, but smaller tanks cannot comfortably house 4 men and their equipment. Something had to be removed, the loader was removed. In his place, Soviet engineers installed an autoloader, a mechanical carousel beneath the turret that stored propellant charges and projectiles in a rotating ring around the crew compartment. It was fast, it was reliable. It allowed the gun to be fired at a consistent rate regardless of crew fatigue, and it allowed the tank's profile to shrink dramatically. Western tanks made a different choice. They kept the loader. They stored ammunition in separate compartments behind armored bulkheads with blow-off panels designed to vent an internal explosion away from the crew. This made the tanks taller and heavier. It also made them slower to produce and harder to transport. Neither approach was inherently wrong. Each reflected a different assumption about how war would be fought. The T-72 assumed speed and mass would protect its crew. It assumed that if a tank was hit badly enough for the ammunition to ignite, survival was already unlikely. It assumed that reducing the chance of being hit at all was the better trade. For years, this assumption went largely unchallenged. In training footage, T-72 crews move with mechanical precision. The interior is cramped but familiar. Steel surfaces press close on all sides. Every lever and switch is memorized by touch. The smell of oil and hot metal never fully dissipates. Communication is short, functional, almost impersonal. Inside the turret, the commander stands slightly elevated, scanning through optics that compress the world into narrow, magnified tunnels. The gunner sits forward, hands on controls, eyes fixed on reticles and range scales. The driver lies reclined in the hull, legs stretched forward, watching the ground rush beneath him through a slit barely wider than a book. Beneath them, unseen but always present, the carousel turns quietly when commanded. One round aligns. The mechanism lifts it. The gun fires. The carousel rotates again. It is efficient, it is impersonal, and it works, until it doesn't. Modern anti-tank weapons do not need to destroy a tank to defeat it. They need only penetrate deeply enough to disrupt what is inside. A shaped charge jet, traveling faster than sound, can punch through armor measured in hundreds of millimeters. It does not explode in the way people imagine. It burns its way through, creating a narrow, intensely hot channel. If that channel intersects with fuel, hydraulics, or ammunition, the physics change instantly. Inside a T-72, ammunition is everywhere the crew is. The propellant charges are not sealed inside thick metal cases. They are semi-combustible, wrapped in flammable material designed to burn completely when fired. They sit upright in the carousel, surrounding the crew like pillars. Additional rounds are often stowed in the turret and hull, tucked into any available space to increase combat endurance. In theory, these are managed carefully. In practice, especially in wartime, extra ammunition is carried whenever possible. Each additional charge becomes another potential point of ignition. When one of those charges ignites unintentionally, there is no slow escalation. There is no time to react. Survivors describe the moment before impact as strangely quiet. Radios crackle. The engine vibrates steadily. The gun stabilizer hums. Sometimes there is the faint metallic whine of the turret traversing, or the clatter of tracks over broken ground. Routine noises. Familiar, almost comforting in their predictability. Then there is a sound not unlike a door being slammed by the world itself. The pressure spike is instantaneous. Superheated gases expand faster than the mind can register. The overpressure inside the crew compartment has nowhere to go. Every surface reflects it back inwards. The turret ring is the weakest structural point between hull and turret. The expanding gases find it immediately, like water finding a gap under a door. The turret lifts. It is not thrown sideways. It is pushed straight up, guided by the geometry of the tank itself. For a fraction of a second, the entire mass of steel, optics, and armor becomes weightless, riding on a column of burning propellant and fragmented metal. The crew does not experience fire first. They experience acceleration, a violent, disorienting force that exceeds what the human body is designed to endure. Outside, observers often see the turret rise, twist, and fall nearby. To them, it looks almost surreal, a piece of machinery behaving like a discarded toy. Dust billows. Flames vent from the open hull. Chunks of armor and track are scattered in a rough circle. The air smells of explosives, fuel, and scorched earth. Inside, there is no perception of movement as movement. There is only a sudden absence of structure. Panels, equipment, and human bodies are no longer where they were an instant before. Gravity returns too late to matter. This phenomenon becomes known informally as the jack-in-the-box. It is a term used by those who have seen it too often, and it carries none of the humor the name suggests. Not every penetration causes a cook-off. Many T-72s are hit and continue fighting. Some burn without detonating. Some crews escape. The danger is probabilistic, not guaranteed. Angle of impact, type of ammunition, location of stowage, the exact sequence of failures. All of these details decide whether a crew has a chance or no chance at all. But when it happens completely. On the other side of the battlefield, the soldiers firing the weapons rarely see the crew. They see a silhouette, a thermal signature, a brief flash of light as the missile leaves the tube. The guidance wire spools out. A distant plume marks impact. They are trained to fire again if necessary. Confirmation of destruction is procedural, not emotional. Later, when they approach the wreck, the silence is what unsettles them. The tank is open to the sky in ways it should not be. The ground nearby is scorched in a circular pattern. Fragments of track and road wheels lie at odd angles. There are no signs of movement, no voices, no weapons abandoned in haste, just the suggestion that something ended very quickly. Western tank crews watching footage of these events often react with disbelief. Their own tanks have been penetrated before. They have lost vehicles. But the survival of the crew, even when the tank is destroyed, is treated as an expectation rather than a hope. They train to bail out through hatches that, while still cramped, are relatively accessible. They rely on ammunition stored behind armored doors, isolated from where they sit and work. Blow-off panels, if triggered, channel the energy of an internal explosion outwards and upwards, away from living space. The tank may be gutted. The turret may be ruined. But in many cases, the crew walks away. Yet those same Western tanks pay a different price. They are heavier. They consume more fuel. They are harder to transport by rail or bridge. Their size makes concealment more difficult. Their logistical footprint is enormous. Every kilometer they move demands fuel trucks, maintenance crews, spare parts, and planning. In urban environments or soft ground, that weight becomes a liability. In narrow streets, a taller profile is easier to target from above with rockets or improvised charges. On weak bridges or soaked fields, the mass that protects the crew can also trap the vehicle. Every design choice shifts risk rather than eliminating it. The T-72 crew understands their risk differently. Many are conscripts. Some have limited training time and come from civilian backgrounds far removed from complex machinery. They learn the mechanics of their vehicle quickly, how to start it, drive it, fire it, repair minor faults, but the deeper implications of its design are rarely emphasized, not because of deception, but because doctrine assumes acceptance. Inside the tank, the crew forms a closed psychological loop. They cannot see each other fully. The commander might glimpse the top of the gunner's helmet. The driver is completely cut off, a voice coming from the hull through intercom cables. They rely on voices over headsets, on brief phrases, on rehearsed drills. Trust is abstract but absolute. Each man depends on the others to do their task correctly, because there is no space for redundancy. When a tank is hit and does not immediately explode, time stretches. Noise becomes fragmented. The clang of impact, the sharp hiss of escaping gases, the sudden acrid bite of smoke. Alarms scream in mechanical tones. The crew must decide whether to stay and fight or abandon the vehicle. Hatches are small. Exits are awkward. The commander must twist and climb. The gunner must wait for the turret to be in a position that allows escape, unless he forces his way past obstacles. The driver has to pull himself upward from a reclined position, relying on handholds memorized in training, often in darkness or blinding smoke. Escape requires coordination under conditions where coordination is breaking down. Seconds matter. So does direction. Stepping out on the wrong side of the tank can mean stepping into the field of fire that hit it in the first place, but hesitation is its own danger. Flames spread along leaking fuel and hydraulic fluid. Burning propellant fills the compartment with toxic gases. What begins as a survivable hit can become unsurvivable in less than the time it takes to form a complete thought. Some crews survive because the ammunition does not ignite. Others survive because the penetration misses the carousel by centimeters, striking a compartment where there is nothing critical to burn. Some survive because they are fortunate enough to be hit by older or poorly aimed weapons. Those margins are invisible until afterward. In interviews conducted years later, surviving crew members rarely speak about the explosion itself. They speak about the sound, about the sudden heaviness in the air, about the smell of burned insulation and rubber, about the knowledge that once a certain threshold is crossed, there is nothing they can do. They speak about other crews they knew who did not come back, about passing a familiar tank position one day and seeing only a blackened shell the next. They speak about recognizing their tanks afterward by markings, not by shape, because the silhouette they knew has been replaced by a torn and ruptured outline. There is no hatred in these recollections. Mostly there is resignation, a quiet understanding that their survival depended as much on abstract design choices made long before they were born as on anything they did personally under fire. From a purely technical standpoint, the T-72 remains an effective tank. It has been upgraded repeatedly. New armor packages reduce penetration risk. Reactive armor bricks decorate its surfaces, adding layers of explosive countermeasure between incoming jets and the underlying steel. Ammunition handling has been improved in later variants. Some versions attempt to isolate propellant more effectively or reduce the number of loose rounds inside the crew space. But the fundamental layout remains. The autoloader remains beneath the crew. The carousel still circles the inside of the hull like a ring of potential energy waiting for a trigger it was never meant to receive. The tank continues to reflect the assumptions of its origin, that war is decided by formations, not individuals, that survivability is statistical, that simplicity under mass production outweighs exceptional protection for a few. It embodies a belief that a slightly higher chance of total loss in individual vehicles is acceptable if it allows many more vehicles to be fielded at once. For the soldiers facing it, the cook-off becomes both a tactical goal and a psychological marker. A destroyed tank is not just removed from the fight, it sends a message to those still advancing. It reinforces fear without words. The sight of a turret lying separately from its hull is a reminder that armor is not invulnerability, that inside every fighting machine there are men as fragile as anyone else. For those inside, the knowledge lingers quietly. It is not discussed openly during daily routines. It sits beneath maintenance checks and briefings, beneath jokes told over ration cans and cigarettes. A background understanding that the margin between survival and disappearance can be thinner than armor suggests, decided in microseconds by angles and trajectories no human can see coming. After battles end, wrecked tanks remain where they fell. They become landmarks, navigation points, warnings. Children climb on them years later, unaware of the decisions and doctrines embedded in their steel. Grass grows around shattered track links. Rust spreads along torn armor. The violence that tore turret from hull becomes history, then scenery. The crews are remembered differently, sometimes as numbers on casualty lists, sometimes as names carved into local memorials, sometimes not at all, lost in the anonymity of mass mobilization. What happens when the ammunition cooks off inside a T-72 is not just a mechanical failure. It is the collision of design philosophy with modern lethality. It is the moment when efficiency reveals its cost. It is not a story of incompetence or cruelty. It is a story of choices made far from the battlefield, meeting realities they could not fully control. And long after the turret has fallen silent and the smoke has cleared, what remains is not victory or defeat, but absence. An empty hull, a patch of scorched earth, a turret lying at an unnatural angle under open sky, and the quiet understanding, shared by those who have seen it, that some systems work exactly as designed, right up until the moment they destroy the people inside them.